Welcome. As usual, we'll give folks a minute or so to join in on the Zoom call if they're going to be here. I now call this board workshop of the South Woody School Board to order. Thank you. I'll turn first to Director Jackson for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. We gather on Indigenous land. This island, known now as Whidbey, once known as Chakolchi, according to some stories. I imagine that it had other names because it has been home to many people. It is home to the Snohomish tribe. The islands of this region and of the Salish Sea are home to the Coast Salish peoples, peoples of the Lower Skagit, Suquamish, Stillaguamish, people of the Tulalip tribes, currently affiliated with the Tulalip tribes in the Marysville area and with ancestral homes here and beyond this place. And we acknowledge the role of Indigenous community members, past, present, and future, in stewarding our youth's educational experiences, in caring for community and place, in all the many ways which students, Indigenous and otherwise, are nurtured and supported and encouraged to grow and thrive by Indigenous worldviews and Indigenous lifeways. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jackson. I will note that this is a board workshop, so if someone watching in person or in Zoom would like to comment, just raise your hand if you're in person and we'll get you a mic. If you are on the Zoom call and would like to comment, please use the Q&A function. First, just note in the Q&A your name and general location, just Clinton, Freeland, Langley, Coopville, whatever it might be, general location is just fine. And just enter that first so we know that there's a comment incoming and can pause. And then please type in your comment and it will be read out here so that it can be addressed. Please do include a full thought to the comment, not just, yes, I agree with that, because there's every chance that we will be two topics on by the time you say you agree with that, and we want to correctly attribute your agreement. If you're in person, just raise a hand. We'll get a mic to you. Please introduce yourself the first time you speak, and otherwise we'll just make this an open discussion on the items on the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is our budget presentation. I'll look first to Dr. Clifford, who I assume will turn it over to Mr. Field, but since it is your first meeting as superintendent in the seat officially, welcome, and I'll turn it to you first.
Thank you.
Can we flip the order, Brooke, and do the budget extension first before the budget presentation? Would that be all right?
Absolutely. This is all budget discussion. How you choose to address it, completely up to you.
So I'm just so grateful for Paul and the work that he's done. He's made sure that his I's are dotted and T's are crossed. He's done this will be an extensive presentation that gives a lot of good information, and we will look forward to sharing that with you. And if you have questions, we hope to answer those. And I'm going to hand it over to Paul now.
So the first item here is a budget extension for the current year, and the extension just adds to our capacity. When we put in our budget with the state, it's our authorization to spend, and that's the only main part of the budget that the state looks to is our authorization to spend. So we're requesting a budget extension of $500,000. When you do the F200 process, which is the budget extension process, they make you update your revenue as well. So we're anticipating $736,000 more revenue from the state, and we're asking to spend $500,000 more. I don't anticipate that we will need all 500,000 of that. In our current budget status, it shows with encumbrances, we're going over 214,000. I still think that number is high. As we get through the end of the year and we do our year-end close, there are specific expenditures that get transferred to the capital levy, and that's still captured in encumbrances. Either way, it's going to be really tight, much like it was last year. Last year we asked for 550 and we ended up not needing it and being $80,000 under our budgeted expenditures. This year, I think we may just barely go over, but this just gives us the cushion to make it. And this isn't an uncommon practice. We did this in 2017, 18, 2018, 19, and 22, 23. We did it for the Transportation Vehicle Fund, and we also did the same process last year. We budget so tight in our methodology that when things change or we get new revenue, we decide to spend it, we end up bumping right up against our budget capacity.
Well, I appreciate how close you've come, considering that we have an additional, what is it, almost 50 students over the budgeted amount. So considering that we have 50 more students and the attendant staff to go with that and other costs to go with that, I think that ending up with an additional $250,000 in the general fund and having to increase our capacity by $500,000 is pretty dang good.
This is a resolution that needs to be voted on.
Not
This
today.
is just the presentation to have the conversation. If there were comments or conversation about the budget extension, it'll be voted on next board meeting.
Perfect. Okay.
If we do everything right, there will be no votes at this meeting.
That's what I thought,
Yeah.
but there was
Yeah.
a pause, so I was
Yep.
just trying to read the pause.
Nope. That was me reading to see if there were any other comments or questions coming in.
Just commendations as usual on an excellent job. Well done. Thank you.
So clarifying question. So all in one, in the extension, we are requesting to spend $500,000 more. And we're also letting the state know that we're bringing in an additional $700,000 or $800,000 in revenue.
Yeah, so when you go through the process, you have to go back to your apportionment report and add what your actual anticipated apportionment is, because we get our numbers set after October count. And then when we get to January, they readjust it to the actual FTE. So we started getting that increased money in January. Now that all of the counts are done, we've done our final count as of June, we know how much money we're going to get from the state. So as part of this process, they make you put in the number so it matches your apportionment report. And in doing so, it's increased our budget because we budgeted with less students. So when you look at the bottom, the original budget was to use $736,000 of fund balance, and now it's down to under 500,000. I still think in reality, it's going to be less than that.
Thank you. Yeah, echoing my colleagues, I appreciate just how accurate your budgets have been. Thank you.
I actually do have a question on this. Just looking at the expenditures here, is there a reason outside of simplicity that all of the $500,000 is in support services, or is that
No.
just
Well,
simplicity?
so that is where we're going over. Part of the places we're going over, but it is for simplicity. The state gets our staffing reporting to the state is tied to the staffing cost. So when you start plugging additional staffing costs and you don't have the exact S275 FTE to match, it really makes it wonky. So they just recommend put it in what they call their 5s and 7s, your supplies and support services, just to add the capacity, even if it is being driven by staff, because you're not tied to, I said I'm going to pay for staffing and I'm going over staffing to budget extension for staffing. It's just bottom line.
Makes total sense. I just wanted to confirm that my assumption was correct, and it was. Thank you. Anything else? I'm not seeing anything from our two attendees on Zoom, although one of them is you. And the other one is someone who is almost as familiar with our district's budgets. It's Dan Pullman. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. I think that's set on the extension. Thank you.
So this is for our F-195 budget for next year. This is our, we'll start with the general fund and we'll go through. So go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. So this is a working document, and I do know right now there are things I have to change. When it got imported to the state, it duplicated our FTE for teachers, and it's just a functionality of how the budget mechanism works. So I have to fix that, but it's not going to change the dollars. So when it says this is a working document, that's where we are right now. The other thing you'll see is when we get to travel, there's a big uptick in travel. And the reason that is there is it's holding a person for ALE because we made that decision late in the budget process. So I just wanted to stuff it in there so the capacity was there, and I will try to fix that in the next couple of days so it actually lands to the personnel cost. So we will, those are two things I know that are going to be adjusted as we're going through, but the bottom line numbers shouldn't change. So that's when this is a working document. It is working. It's not due till the end of the month, and I will been using every minute to try to get it to here. So
Well, and I appreciate that because that answered one of my questions already.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah, I'll point it out when we get there too. I have it highlighted. So the state requires us to do fund accounting, and we have 5 funds: the general fund, capital projects fund, debt service, ASB, and TDF, which is a transportation vehicle fund. We're all pretty familiar with that. We get reported on it every month. We're here doing the statutory budget hearing and then the adoption. Here's the RCWs if folks are interested in reading them further. And the next slide here is the timeline. We got our presentation posted on the 8th. We got our actual F-195 posted super early this morning because I forgot to print it off, but it is available on the district website. The last slide of this presentation has the link to where it's at for the full-blown 153-page F-195 report. So that is there. So we're on this timeline here. We're giving the presentation today. We'll vote on the 23rd, and then I will get the budget adopted on the 24th with the state. We have to run a balanced budget, and what that means is our revenue and expenditures plus beginning fund balance can't leave us in a negative position, and all of our funds are budgeted that way as well. We'll see that as we get into the F-195F and through this presentation. School board policy for minimum fund balance is 1/12 or 8.33%, 1 month operating expenses. And when we get to the F-195F, you'll see that's how we drew out the F-195F, just showing theoretically what we could do if we wanted to draw it all the way down. I don't believe that's any of our intent, but that's how I did the F-195F this year. So this is the legislative session. IPD was 2.5%. You'll see that flow through on our revenue and our expenditures. Our health insurance premiums increased up to $1,548. It was $1,307 last year. So that's the cost per person per month or per year. That's the per year increase for each individual. And then our MSOX rate increased by 3%. Special education cap was removed. It was previously 16%. And in the current year, our experience factor, which helps increase the amount of standard apportionment we get, went from 1% to 0. And we'll see that on the next couple slides here, how that's been drawn down from 4% to 0% over the last several years. So issues facing the district is enrollment loss. Even though we had an uptick this year, it's historically been declining. We've budgeted it to do the same. Our budgeted numbers are actually really close to last year, but to our current actual FTE, we're budgeting it to be down because this has been our historical trend, and I don't have confidence that the students we received are necessarily going to be here next year. And we are still on a 60 kid in, 85 kid out. So 60 kindergartners in, 85 seniors leaving. So we're still on a declining trend. So we'll get to that too when we get into our enrollment. This basic education funding model in itself is detrimental to us or not as favorable to us as other districts. Inflation, we're all experiencing that at the grocery store and everywhere else. The underfunded and unfunded mandated programs, and new to this list this year is the federal funding, specifically Title II, should see Title II, Title III, and Title IV. But those 3 programs, Title III is new to us this year. We may have gotten it in the past, but we'll get to that as well. It's only $1,300 this year, but the other funds are a little more substantial. We'll see that in the budget. So this is the prototypical funding model, just a summary of McCleary did the levy swap, which capped the amount of money that we could levy as a school district specifically, and it increased the property taxes across the state. It gave districts a regionalization factor between 24 and 18%, which based on where you lived, it would increase the standard apportionment for your district. And on top of that, there was an experience factor. And you'll see that here in the next slide where we started at 24 and 4. We had both of those at their maximum. And over the last several years, it's gone from 8 down to regionalization of 18 and experience to 0. So we have this triple whammy of losing regionalization dollars, losing experience factor dollars, and declining enrollment. And you'll see in our revenue graph how our revenues only increased over the last 5 years, 4% in total. So that's just one of the battles that our district has been fighting for several years. So the prototypical funding money, we get staffing allocation based on the numbers of students we have, and then funding per staffing member. That is the prototypical model. So the student FTE drives the number of teachers we get. The number of teachers we get drives the dollars we get for the funding per teacher. Our classification, CIS is our certificated instructional staff. Classified staff for folks like myself, our custodial team and food service team, and then certificated administrators are our principals. This is the chart that shows in 2019, 2020, we were at the total enhancement to our base allocation from the state of 24%. And that allocation has decreased every year over time to where we are now, from 28% down to 18%. So our enhancement from the state has decreased 10% over that time frame. And this also shows, when you look at the blue line for IPD in 25-26, it's 2.5%. But given our enrollment trend and our reducing experience factor, that equates for a certificated instructional staff to 1.6% more dollars. So the state said they've increased everything 2.5%, but for our funding of our teachers, we actually only get passed through 1.64, given the other declining factors that we face. It stays, we actually got the full 2.5% for our classified staff and our certificated administrators because they don't have any increased factors for experience. In the prior years, it varied because we were still getting experience and decreased regionalization, but our regionalization has been flat since 22-23. Enrollment, get caught. Notes, still same notes here. So this is our current year enrollment, and it wasn't as nails as it was last year with less than 1% different, but we are within 4%, and we can show that our budgeted to actual were 48 kids more, 48.94 FTE than budgeted. So that's a positive trend for the current year. And I just show this for reference as we get into the current year, or the budget 25-26 budgeted enrollment. So we talked about this a few board meetings ago, but how I did our enrollment this year is I went through a variation of a straight roll forward, a weighted cohort, a cohort survival, several methods, and did a comparison. And then those items in pink, I pulled out 12 kids in total because that pink line, it's an unusual trend. That's where we picked up most of our students this year to get our increase in over budget. We're in those pink columns. So are those students going to stay? I'm not confident that they are. So we removed 6 from each of those, and that's how we got to our 193.09. Christy, if you'll go back to the previous slide, you can see last year we budgeted 1099.12, and this year we're budgeting 1093.09. So it's roughly the same budgeted students as we had in the current year. But going through that same exercise, it didn't do the actual decline like we've seen over years. It's basically holding it flat year over year.
Well, and considering that most of that increase did come in 4th and 5th grade, that's an unusual time for them to come in that suggests a blip rather than a trend.
Correct. Yeah. Then either way is, like I know I'm showing us going down 37.97 students. We're still on its face, 63 kindergartners coming in and 85 leaving in 24-25 for 12th grade. So right there, you have 22 students. So we're still on this downward trajectory until we start getting K classes of 80 or larger. I think we'll continue to see this downward trend. And that's the approach I took for this year's budget. Budgeted FTE, and student FTE is what drives everything else for our revenue.
Well, and I do appreciate the conservative approach to this because it's a whole lot better to get more money in January and have to do a budget extension because we have more students, so we need to spend more on them than it is to realize in January, oh no, we're getting less than expected because we have to basically pay something back for the first
Right.
several months.
And our contracts are tied in, so if we miss on the low side, that's coming right out of fund balance, because there's a lot of we'll see when we get to expenditures, 83% of our expenditures is contracted labor. And we're kind of, not all of it, because we have some classified, but 80% of it is labor. And when you commit to those people for a year, you're tied to them for a year. So it ends up just coming out of fund balance. So in my opinion, that's the best way, just to budget conservative on your enrollment, but you don't want to go so conservative that you're having to try to hire a bunch of folks in September, October, because that can be tough too. So the summary breakdown here by each classification of student. We carried forward all of the special ed kids that we ended the year with. I don't know that we've always done that, but after talking with the SPED team, it doesn't sound like they're going anywhere. So we just brought them forward at their full FTE. And then our bilingual students are into the year with 12. So we brought 12 forward because again, we checked and it sounds like those families are staying in community. So we'll hopefully have them as well. So revenue. Our revenue comes from 5 major sections: our local property taxes, which is our levy funds, local district generated funds. So think food service, class fees, rental income is our main one for that one, for our the community center and the admin space down by me. State apportionment, which is your general state funding, state categorical funding, your SPED programs, LAP programs, and then your federal categorical programs, so IDEA and your title programs. Go ahead, thank you. This is just showing it in a chart form where our funding comes from. We'll get into a table form that's a little easier to read, but it just shows the most of our funds come from the state general purpose apportionment, followed by our state special purpose funds. Federal is that very small slice of 1.1 million. And then our voter approved levy at $3.7 million. So this is our levy calculation. The 2025 levy is 3.6 million. 2026 is 3.9. That's a calendar year. We have to take the collection rate for both of those over the year to get what we're actually expecting for our 25-26, because it's paid twice a year. And we're expecting that 3.7 million number there for our enrichment levy. And from our voter approved, and we need it, so I appreciate it. Thank you, voters. Current use for our local enrichment levy. So this is that voter approved levy. Athletics, staff not funded by the state and feds. Unfunded MSOCs, our utilities insurance, where we don't get enough funding to cover those costs. Food services and transportation expenditures, and then other negotiated benefits that are not covered in the state funding model.
One of the biggest uses of that for me is additional support staff, teaching support staff, paraeducators and the like, that I've seen the difference that can make in classrooms. And so I'm very happy that very thankful that the community has supported us so well so that we can continue to provide that support for our teaching staff.
Critical for us. So, oh yes, thank you. So here's local revenue broken down in a table with a year-over-year comparison. The 24-25 is an estimate. I go through where we are now and try to bring it to August the best I can, and that's compared to our 25-26 budget. That'll look different on expenditures. I'll just say it now, I used our budgeted expenditures and budget expenditures when we get to expenditures, because we're so close to our current year budget. It's the best comparison for where we're at. Instead of trying to make an estimate, our budget is the estimate. So anyhow, back to this just shows us line by line how things are lining up. Each one of those local revenue items. So this is going to go through each slide of the piece of the pie in greater detail. So for our state revenue, we have our apportionment. You can see it's ticking up slightly for both the state apportionment and the SPED apportionment. apportionment. Transitional kindergarten's ticking down slightly this year, and that's because we're capped to 15 students this year because of how this transition to kindergarten is not part of basic ed. It lives outside of basic ed. It is still funded by the state, but the state wanted to control their TK costs this year, so they're not allowing any more FTE across the state. I believe it was in April where they took how many FTE in transitional kindergarten did you have? And that's what we will fund you for next year. We were at, I think, 15.4 and got rounded down to 15. That doesn't mean operationally that we won't run 17, but currently we'll only get funded for 15. We'll have to see what the state does, if there's other programs that are under, if they allow that allocation to go to other schools or not, that's to be seen. But right now we're moving forward with the 15 students that will be funded for. And then this doesn't show capacity. That's why in the state and other agencies that's showing 0, because that's where we hold our contingency fund. And I pulled that number out just to show where we're at. 'Cause I don't want to blur the lines of contingency dollars with what we're actually looking to claim. We put that contingency on both sides. So it's on the revenue side and the expenditure side. So it doesn't affect the bottom line, but it just gives us some cushion if things outside of this plan were to occur. So this is our federal revenue. And the two items that I have circled there in red are the two programs that the federal government has not released the allocation. Typically, we would know in January or July 1st what our anticipated funding would be. So those are the dollars that we're talking about from this. So it's around $52,000. The other part of that it's not budgeted for is Title III. We're looking to get $1,300 for Title III this year. It's new. It's because of our increase in our English speaking learners. But I didn't budget for that small of a dollar amount specifically. Other than that, our federal funds are just kind of lining up with what we had anticipated with the prior years.
I had a question from Director Johnson, who was unable to make it today, but sent a couple in, including, will our ALE, TK, SWA, and other learning programs that are satellite to our traditional model be protected under this budget if those federal dollars continue to be inaccessible?
ALE is a state program, so that's fine. TK is also a state program. We just talked about where that's being capped by the state at 15. And so I didn't hear, what was the third one?
SWA.
SWA is a high school within the high school. So that's its own standalone program. It's basic ed in the high schools. We have South Whidbey High School, and then we have South Whidbey Academy. They're two separate high schools in the same facility.
Along that, I've also been doing some reading around the projections that families may be hesitant to send their kids to school this year. And so I'm wondering if we have given thought around ways that those programs that have more remote access can grow, maybe unanticipated in an unanticipated way throughout the year, and just keeping that in the back of our mind as well.
We have already currently increased our ALE program by 0.5 with the ability, well, we are in the process of hiring, and that will have the ability to grow if we need to and if we have the capacity.
That's that travel dollar amount is where we made that decision about ALE, and I just stuffed it in the budget because I was
Clarification question. So the final column for the budget for next year, does that, this assumes those titles that are being unfunded are actually unfunded? Is that why there's
it's
red
showing
box?
them in there. So when we went
Oh,
through,
okay.
when we did our consolidated grant application, those dollar amounts were in there. So I put it in, and then since then there's maybe a pause in the funding of it. So it's around $52,000, and how I am justifying that is we got $57,000, a one-time payment from the state of $57,000 this year as they made a distribution of funds. So we can use those funds to help these programs if need be. So I left it in the budget because we have equivalent of cash in the bank right now. It's kind of a one-for-one. That's why I left it in. We're aware it may or may not happen.
All right, thank you.
One more question about federal dollars and planning. In my own organization, we have pulled out of grants that have federal funding because the fine print has become really dangerous as an organization to sign on to. Have we noticed any changes in any of those grant applications? Okay.
We have not, and there's been conversations at OSPI and WASDA and the other programs keeping an eye on those sorts of things, that they don't put in a criteria that maybe put us in a way without letting us know and wanting to take on the risk, but they haven't seen any of it yet.
And I apologize, I didn't send this question forward. I was just curious about the lowering of the Title I, $45,000, $46,000. Is there a particular reason for that between this year and next year? Or is that just due to enrollment changes and?
When we put in our grant and our enrollment changes, it's calculated for you in your consolidated grant. So I brought in the dollars from the application process.
Excellent. I figured it was just enrollment, but thank you for confirming that.
So this is the revenue of all the ones we just went through, just summarized without all the detail by the high level. This is that graph I was speaking to, that over this time frame from 21, 22, our total revenue or apportionment has only increased 3.9% from 21, 22 to 25, 26. And you can kind of see the up and down that we've had. So we've been basically stagnant over that time frame in total. So, and maintained and held a healthy fund balance.
Despite IPD being higher than that most of those years
Correct.
individually.
Yeah. So any revenue questions before we get into expenditures? So this is the definition of our employee costs. So we have their salary, but on top of that, we have the other items of our FICA and Medicare, and those are their percentages, our retirement rates, the paid family medical leave. And then the big one here is that sub-medical insurance that kicked up this year. That's per person for the year. VIBA, we've negotiated, everyone's on the same VIBA rate now, so it's $1,500 per person. And then the employee assistance and HCA administration fee.
So I'm doing math correct. That's $1,300 a month for each premium, essentially.
Yes, yeah, it's 1303. It was on that other slide.
I think that
Yes,
was just a
think it's
straight increase.
1307 per
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. That's crazy.
So that's when we hire part-time people, we're very mindful of that, because if they cross, I think it's 630 hours, which Paula was here to answer that, it's $15,000 just like that, because then we have to pay it for the year. So we're mindful of that. We try not to keep people, we don't want to avoid people from getting insurance, but we're mindful of that when we have these part-time FTEs, because that is a factor that happens, and they do it and we pay it when we need to. So MSOX, material supplies and other cost, it's basically everything that's not a salary. Fuel bus fuel, liability insurance, utilities, maintenance contracts, all of those things. So the state looks at expenditures in three ways, and it's program, activity, and object. So we're going to go through those three things. The dollar amounts in these next sections don't change in total. It's just the different lens that the state looks through how we're spending our dollars. So we're first going by program, and here you have our support services, regular instruction, other instructional programs, vocational, special education. You will see that in a table form, a little easy to read on the next slide. So this really blows apart regular instruction to all the categories that fall within that. State special purpose. That's where we have our national boards and our HSEP, the Homeless Student Stability Fund, the reason that's dropping down this year from 157 to basically $100,000 is we lost the state outdoor learning grants, both of them. So we have the Principals Association grant and the state outdoor learning grant, and both of those didn't make the cut. So that's why you see that dip in the budgeted revenue there for that specific line item.
And to my recollection, there's been looking to some other sources locally to try to make up some of that difference so we can still provide outdoor education for our
We're
students.
working on it to see what we
Yeah.
can come up with at the state level too. They're still trying to figure out what they can do, or a state community level of where can we find grants to do those sorts of things still. So this takes this big graph and then collapses it down without all the details so you can get more of a comparison side by side. So the decrease compensatory ed, that is our HCL program. That's budgeting. We get more money for that for HCL, but the part of the expenditure lies in the teacher's salary that teaches AP classes at the high school. And annually at the end of the year, we move it to that program to capture all the dollars. What's in it now is lining up with the historical average of the stipend used by the middle school HCL individual and the supplies that they use at a historical level. And that's why when you look, you can see the expenditures are higher for that program with the exception of 21, 22, because that's when driver's ed was in there. But from 22, 23 forward, we run HCL at the middle school level, and then at the end of the year, as part of an adjusting entry, we capture some of the costs related to our AP programs. But the budget in there this year is strictly the supplies cost for the middle school portion of that program.
And is the increase, the 15% increase in special ed, is that due to the cap lifting?
No, that's a combination of staffing cost, and then we've budgeted additional costs for out-of-state placements that we may be facing next year. Now we switch to a different lens of object code. So this is more where it's salaries, benefits, supplies, and purchase services. So program aside, just what are we spending the dollars on at a more like an item based. And this is where that travel expenditure that I spoke to earlier, the reason that is up is it's holding money for the ALE halftime teacher that we added right as I was getting ready to push this off to the state. So I stuck it in travel because I know ALE is not traveling that amount of money, so I know it was there, and I'm going to look to try to correct that here in the next couple of days so it lands in the salary section. So this is the summary for object code.
Yes, that 174% in travel certainly stood out, but thank you for the explanation earlier on that.
That's basically that change is, I believe that is all a fully burdened halftime teacher. So I basically took our current teacher at whatever MA 90 level, cut it in half, fully burdened with all their benefits, and just plopped it in there so we had the capacity. The next is a bar graph by object code. So our certificated salaries and classified salaries are higher, and we took a little bit different approaches here with Dr. Motion and transition years. We budgeted every teacher and para that we had at the end of the year and brought them forward in the budget. That's not to say all of the non-continuing contracts are not filled, but there is budget capacity in there for it if we need to add people back. It's been a different approach in the past. This is when we started getting into this with bargaining and stuff, it's just what we decided to bring forward is bring them back in hopes that our budgeted FTE is lining up very similar to what we had budgeted last year. That's the approach we took. And so all of the teachers, so think band director of 20 some years as the top of the scale, is budgeted in this budget at that level. And we know right there, the teacher that came in behind is not the top step teacher. So we're adding capacity in there. And that's the approach we took this year, specifically with classified staff. we had a number of non-continuing contracts. We budgeted those positions, but those contracts are not currently filled. And we will evaluate when we get to the beginning of the school year if we will fill those positions because the need is there. It's to help with potentially avoid a budget extension if need be, but our approach with unknowns of unknown bargaining units too. We have 2 unsettled units as well. So it's a conservative approach to make sure that we had as much capacity as we needed.
And I do appreciate that conservative approach to make sure that we're not scrambling at the budget at any point there, although it is a pretty extreme looking jump looking at the bar graph, but knowing that that's capacity, it's not expectation of use, is very helpful for me.
Yeah, so I will start my personnel budgeting process a lot earlier than I did this last year. Dr. Clifford and I have already talked about how we will be more prepared starting in January, basically coming back from Christmas break and looking at where we're at and who's going where. And I will be more prepared for that process this coming year. So this just this next graph is just to show our employee cost is 83% of our budget. And then non-employee cost is 4.15 million, or 4.1 million. Of that 4.1 million, $1.2 million of that is insurance and electricity. So we take that out, we're under $3 million of other stuff that's not employee cost. You can sprinkle in other large ticket items like our food service provider, which is running around $335,000. And that piece of the pie just keeps getting narrower and narrower of what we have flexibility to actually do outside of keep the lights on and keep teachers and paras in the classroom, along with all of our food service and buses running and things like that.
And curriculum purchases, yeah.
So it's just the reality of school districts. So I just put that in there to illustrate when we get down, like how can we align the priorities? We're talking about a pretty narrow slice of the actual funding pie, and we're not directing personnel to do the items that we're trying to our priorities of the district. So the last lens is activity type, and we kind of group these together. In the accounting code, they run from 01 down to 99, the different types of activities, but we group them together into like types. So teaching activity is 13.7 million. Teaching support, which is largely counselors, actually guidance counselors, people management, health services, things of that nature. Curriculum is also in that slice of the pie. Central administration, which is basically my office, and building administration, which is the principals.
Well, and I appreciate that this demonstrates that we're putting the money where the students are. I mean, it's in teaching activities, teaching support, and other support activities. Yeah, I really appreciate that clear demonstration of where our emphasis is as a board and where our money is going as a district.
And that other support activities is food services and transportation, is just the operations of the building. So this is just that bar chart in graph form. And so that 14% in teaching support is in health services, and that is again related to the out-of-state placements that we're budgeting for. And then the 18% of building administration, we have a admin intern this year, and that's the vast majority of that increase in that line item.
Yeah, between that and negotiated changes in salary, I would expect, yeah.
So this next slide is required by the state. It shows how much money we're getting from state MSOCs, how much money the district is actually going to spend, and how much we're going to cover with the levy funded. This is specifically only program 01 and 97. So teaching 01 and then district operations 97.
I shudder to think what this would look like at a district like Seattle, that levy funded, or the difference between state funded and district actual. Just, I mean, this is a tiny district and it's already almost $700,000. That's just crazy. And a failure by the legislature, in my opinion.
Okay, so that was the general fund. So we're going to switch over to our other funds, which isn't nearly as in depth, but we will capital projects, debt service, ASB, and transportation vehicle. So the capital project funds are capital levy, which is mostly technology, and then major building maintenance programs, and then the capital bond, which is all the work that you're seeing at the high school and here at the elementary school campus. So that's the delineating line there in capital. So we have our levy taxes or our capital levy at 2.3 million, 2.4 million. The local non-support of $1 million is basically the interest I am anticipating earning next year because we're having a bond sale in September. So we'll have close to $60 million in bonds sitting in the bank for the entire year as we draw down paying it, but that should crank a significant amount of interest, which is good. We can use the lift as we continue to work through the bond projects. Broken down into the 4 category site is basically anything outside of the building, think playground and field work. And then the building itself is the envelope and on the inside. So between the elementary school and high school, we're putting in $60.7 million. This is totally a capacity budget. We have the funds. I want the ability to spend them. So we budget basically spending all of the dollars, even though it's likely not going to happen because the bond's running over the next 2 years. But if they're doing well, and I don't want them not to be able to get paid because I've run out of capacity. So this is a capacity budget where we basically budget to spend it all. Questions on capital? Debt service fund pays the bond. This one's a little loose this year because with the bond sale, we won't actually know what the payment schedule for the bonds will be until they sell in September. So I worked with bond counsel or underwriter to get an estimate. This is what he recommended throwing in there because on that first year of a bond sale, there are folks that want to buy a 1-year bond. So there's likely the chance we're going to have to pay a couple $1 million in interest off that sale we're going to do in September. So that's just how this was put together this year. We collect the funds to pay the payment. We pay the payment. So the fund balance usually stays pretty flat year over year. It comes in. The payment is made basically the month after we collect the funds. ASB, again, the budget I do for ASB is different than the budget I do with the students for ASB. This is, again, budgeting capacity. I go through and look at what they've historically spent by these categories and just plop the dollars in there. Again, this is the bottom line for the state, and there's capacity in there for the students if they have a real successful fundraiser and want to spend the money. But the work we do within the clubs on their fund balance report is really where I work with the students on their budget because they actually budget the money they have in hand. This is just a capacity budget, so they have authorization from the state to spend it. So when the students come back to school in early August, we'll sit down and take a look because we'll have to clean up their budgets before we close the year and then make a plan of how we're going to allocate the funds. And I'm hoping at the beginning of the year, I can get the new treasurer together to come in and go through the number of transfers you'll see they did this year compared to prior years. And when we look at that report, that number 9 column, the transfer column, is the students saying, I want money here and I want money there, money in, money out. But that's what they control. And that's what I help with them on the student level. I didn't get a lot of input with this other than to talk to John Sommers to say, hey, I'm doing the budget, but we're going to meet with the students to do their actual budgeting work at the beginning of the year.
Is there a particular reason it's budgeted to keep an additional $10,000 in the fund balance there? Is that just conservative?
It's been growing the last couple of years. So this is just following the trend. I would really like to see it get to balance to 0 or even maybe draw it down a little bit. But right now it continues to grow. They bring in more money than they spend.
So if you'd like to see it at 0, is there any reason not to make the capacity equal? I'm trying to learn here.
Yeah, no, I did. So I was looking at their historical runs of what they've been doing, and they've just historically been adding money. I could have done that, I suppose. And I think in the 4 year, you see it gets closer to that point.
Okay.
But yeah, that's just working with the students to get it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Transportation vehicle fund, again, this is a full capacity. We budget to spend every dollar we have in case we have a crisis and we need to buy 3 buses. We have the capacity. You basically see the money that we get, the $203,000 that we get in revenue, we turn around and spend plus whatever we have on, ending the year with the money that we collected. Because we get the money from the state for buses in August. So you can't really get it and spend it in August. So that's what you'll see when we get the F-195F is basically it comes in and we spend it year over year. So this is the certification page. It shows all of the funds. Again, I think this is technically the MSOX page, and this page is all we actually have to look at, but we look at more. So before we switch over to the F-195F, which is the 4-year plan, are there any questions? F-195F, the 4-year budget. So this is the enrollment projection. And again, this was done quickly, just kind of pushing it out with a slow, basically roll forward drawdown. The state requires this, and it's important to show a balanced budget or to maintain, and we are going to maintain a positive fund balance, but there's not a lot of deep scrutiny and looking forward on this on my part this year. If we start really getting different enrollment things happening, we may look into getting some more professional help in analyzing our local enrollment, birth rates and things like that. But for now, this was just a quick roll forward, basically rolling forward the 60 in, 80 out, moving forward. So this is the 4-year revenue projection. It was basically just brought forward at a 2.5% increase, IPD increase. Expenditures, about the same. I think expenditures is increasing slightly more, and you'll see that on the next slide here when we do the 4-year comparison with the ending fund balance. So if we go to the next. So when I was doing our general fund, I was just working to draw the fund balance down to the 12% over the 4 years, just as a methodology for the 4-year projection. And that's how we got it. So that's showing in the 25-26 budget, a use of fund balance of $1 million. I don't believe that's going to actually be the case with the capacity that we have in and so on going forward to 2028, where we really bend that curve from using fund balance to get us right to the 8% minimum fund balance. So before we ever actually executed a plan like that, we'd have a lot deeper conversation of, we have a board recommended minimum fund balance, but what is the actual comfort level? 8% for me for a district our size is really tight. That's $2 million isn't a lot for something to go wrong. I like where we are now.
I just would agree, I look forward to having that conversation, but I also agree that part of the reason why South Whitby is in such a good position right now is because of the fund balance and then the long-term intentional planning to get here. And when other districts are in a really not great state. So it's an important conversation.
And I would imagine part of our strategic planning in a year.
So the next one here is the capital projects fund. Put a little more planning into this as we plan to spend the bond down. So we have the current year spend, and then next year we'll be wrapping up in 26, 27, all of the bond work. That's the current plan. So you can see that bond fund balance is getting drawn down. If we end all of our projects and still have bond funds, we will have other opportunity. But right now it's too early to say that we'll be going out to bid for our second phase of stuff, and around August 18th is when it'll hit the street. Then we'll have a real better idea of how much funding we're going to have beyond the current plan. But again, that's just drawing down the bond fund balance, and then with the levy, which is split between the technology and our major maintenance projects, just using that as it comes in and projected out for 4 years. Debt service fund, this again is a little bit loose. I followed our bond payment schedule for the current bond that we have out, and then tried my best to sprinkle in what it would look like with the next bond sale. This will be a lot tighter next year when we actually have the payment schedules for the second tranche. Again, we're selling that in September. But for now, it was again, just projecting out what I know we're going to have in principal payments and the rest of it being interest until we actually get a payment schedule. So the next one's ASB. This is where I kind of started showing, trying to draw down to get him back to being with coaching. Let's do the best we can to be money in, money out, and not have a continuing deep growing ASB, because those seniors that leave and raise this money and have it spend it, it's, you raise it for yourselves, be greedy and use it on yourself, use it. Or use it for its intended purpose, or let's make a plan for things, or let's find other costs that you can pick up from the general fund. Hard sell. So, but yeah, no, we'll continue to work on that. We have a great team with Kimmy in the office, Miss Johnson rather, does a great job with the students in working on this plan and getting the transfers into me. I'm looking forward to it. It's probably the best part of my job is working with the students on their plan there. TVF, again, this is just showing we collect the money, the 26, 27, $173,000 for buses, but we're not going to have that to spend because it comes in August. So you carry that forward to the next year and try to buy $168,000 of buses in 27, 28. Again, this is just a capacity budget drawn out into the future years. Our complete F-195 in draft form is available at the website. It'll be updated once I get the certificated staffing piece corrected and replaced. That's where you can find the presentation and our full 153-page state issued F-195. Are there any questions?
I think you actually answered most of my questions. I do have a request. So I realize, Dr. Clifford, you've only been working with us for 2 weeks. You probably don't have your mind wrapped around every last dollar of our budget. And so what I would love to hear this time next year is if there are programs that we're spending money on that aren't showing a good return on investment for student outcomes. And conversely, if there's programs that are either underfunded or not funded that would have, an outsized return.
That's a reasonable and appropriate expectation, and we plan to be in that place to be able to share that and hopefully have some updates throughout the year.
And I know Dr. Clifford's only been here officially for 2 weeks, but we've already been having conversations about operationally things that we do and why. And we're committed to in starting our budget process in January with the administrative team of like how we're going to put things together and get ahead of this earlier and have a better idea of what funds we have and what we want to spend on programming. I'm not the programming guy, I'm the dollar guy. So we've been having those conversations about how do we get eyes on that and build out what we're going to spend our dollars so it lines up with her goals specifically and then the board's goals.
And we as a board have started a couple of committees or working with a couple of committees this year. And I just want to make sure that those funds are within we don't need to see the line item for it, but just want public confirmation that those are going to be appropriately supported by the budget that we have here.
Yes, yep. We have three. We know that there are three official committees, the Climate Committee, the Equity Committee, and Instructional Council. And all three of those will be built in to have supports.
I knew y'all had that under control. I just wanted to state it in public so that we know that we are following up, so the community knows that we are following up on things we direct to be done, that we're making sure that they're actually funded and all that.
And I said will be, they are built in. Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
One last comment for both the board and also the leadership team is that the budget is very complicated. And I wonder how we can continue to engage with the community in a two-way dialogue that helps the community understand the intricacies of the budget, what's under our control, so what they can come to us and say, hey, can you do this or stop doing that, and what's also not in our control, so we can direct them to the appropriate elected official to advocate for change.
Yeah, I get approached by a number of community members asking how they can advocate effectively for schools. So I think that that's something we should always keep top of mind as we're. And in fact, that might be a good segue to board goals. But before we do, I just want to reach out to our student representatives. I know there's a bunch of numbers that made my eyes glaze over a bit, and I'm a spreadsheets guy. So if you got nothing at the moment, that's totally fine. Just wanted to reach out and make sure that you're comfortable with where things are. Okay, I'm seeing head nods. Excellent. So thank you, Mr. Field. Thank you, Dr. Clifford, for the conversations you've had, the hard work you and your team have put in to present this draft budget to us and to the community as well. Let's transition to our discussion of board goals. These are not our goals for someone else. These are our goals for ourselves. And I think that advocacy piece might be a good place to start. Because as a community member and as a board member, I have had a number of guardians come to me talking about how they can effectively advocate for either change in educational methodology or funding or get more supports for their students and other students around them.
Can we first review our goals from this past year? Because I admit that I don't know them by heart.
We could if we had confirmed any. We failed to do that last summer. So no, we cannot. I do have the ones from 2 years ago. Let me pull those up so we can discuss those. Sorry, I should have been prepared for this one, but yeah, I think that's what I want. Yes, 2023-24 goals were 4 plus touch points per year with local elected officials, communicate relevant substantive changes to policy to WASDA, 1 to 2 board members meet with the communications committee to evaluate the district's communication strategies, hold 1 public Q&A forum in 23-24 and 2 in 24-25, create or modify policy to document the board's commitment to equitable community engagement, and engage in 4+ professional development sessions on how to support effective communication with the community. Looking that over, I see the majority of those got ticked off, and I believe we discussed that in our review at the end of that school year, but did not confirm goals for this past year. Excellent. Yes, thank you. So let's fix what we did wrong last year and actually get some goals settled on. I feel like 6 may have been ambitious of us. I think we managed to achieve most of those 6, but I'd like to focus a little more intently on things outside the day-to-day work.
So I would like to call us back to the board goals we had. I think it was like 3, maybe 4 years ago. Particularly goal number 2, which talked about being mindful of everybody's time in these board meetings, moving down to brevity. Some feedback that I have heard from the community is that at times the amount of dialogue that we have in board meetings feels frustrating. That especially when there is an actual disagreement, but it appears that we genuinely just like each other. We like each other's company. And so we seem to be just affirming each other. And so I think we could be more mindful this upcoming year of how that impacts other people's time.
I love that. And I also love to broaden it on not just cutting back, but a general more efficient use of the board's time together towards things that are going to positively impact students.
I have admired Brooke's frequent use of the same gesture, and I can work on using that instead of paragraphs when I have resonance with a speaker.
And the +1 that various board members use.
I wonder about a goal that is specifically related to helping support our new superintendent's success and enhancing our knowledge of and work within our lane, um, especially related to all the many things that are going to be new for Dr. Clifford, and how sometimes I feel like relating with somebody who is newer in their role can lead to overstepping. And certainly we want to see Dr. Clifford's, I should say, your full expression of your potentials and your capacities and your insights in your role. And so I just hope that we stay in our board lane while continuing to be communicative and supportive.
+1.
I just thought of another one as we work forward is keeping in touch with and on top of the work of the various committees that we have formed. Making sure to have appropriate touch points with them throughout the year to ensure that we're getting what we want out of them and that they are giving the opportunity to do the work that needs to be done.
+1. I might also suggest that I really think our goal of advocating up and out is still relevant. And I know we have several board members serving on state level committees, and we've also had our student board members modeling what is possible for other districts in the state. So I hope that we can continue to work towards a goal of that nature.
I'd like to suggest a sub goal of that in assisting other members of the community in advocating for education. Because I think that those are very related. That would be the out for us and the up for them. Yeah. One of the goals there that from 2 years ago was around community forums. The school district sponsored ones tend to be pretty quiet. Do we think that this is still an effective method of communication? I like the opportunity for community members to come and get in conversation with us. I would like to keep doing them. I just want to know if it's effective. I would reach out to our community members who are here and to our board members and everyone else in the room to see if we think that that's a good point of emphasis for us.
I think the areas where I find the most community engagement is when we attend school events. And so I feel like if we are just more committed to being at school events, that allows us to be more visible, more approachable. I think it also works into situations that our families are already at, and we're not adding more to their schedule.
I think that last point may be the important one there. Yeah.
I saw a community member who might have been reaching for a microphone. No, okay, I was mistaken.
I think that might be a good way to handle trying to be more visible without adding additional appointments for community members, is just making it our goal to be more visible at school events.
And that way the various board members can attend the ones that, and at the frequency that fits their schedule and capacity.
Are there ways that the school board members could be visible to the student body that would be helpful? And that doesn't have to be an answer now. That can be something that we talk about throughout the year in regards to this. But that I know we have two excellent conduits for student input to us and from us to the students, but I feel that there is value in being visible and available to students as well. So if ways to do that come up to y'all, please let us know.
I mean, like, I think as previously said, honestly, being at like events and things like that, just seeming more like personal with the students, I think that can create a really nice connection, because I feel like if you're not in like me or Callahan's position, it's hard to like picture the school board. Like I just feel like many students don't really know what's going on. So I feel like even just being at events or just anything like that is a really good idea.
Yeah, and I think along that same vein, your school visits are very helpful, especially to high school students. I think they find it useful to be able to see who their school board members are and to be able to find more of a connection with the school board through that.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else that's come up in this discussion or that you've thought of previously? Thus far, I've got 5, and they are focus on student outcomes and brevity of communication, supporting our new superintendent while staying in our lane and defining our lane, staying in communication with board committees, communicate and advocate up and out and assist community members in doing the same, attend more school events and school visits to be approachable and visible. Does that sound like what we discussed?
It aligns with my notes.
I wanted to drill into support the superintendent and ask the superintendent, what does support look like to you from the board so that we can get more specific wording on that in a way that aligns with your needs and expectations?
That's a great question. I think right now, in the last couple of weeks, I've been able to meet with some of you, and having those scheduled meetings, if it works for board members, is really helpful, because it's a two-way dialogue. I'm able to, I feel like, update you on things that I think is really important, and you're also able to give me some information, give me feedback, input, insights, and also give me updates on things that are going on. I really appreciate when you're asking questions, and especially ahead of board meetings, because you're always pushing towards the future, and also making sure that we're considering things. But I also know that in those questions, there might be some that are outside of scope, but I don't feel like I feel like it's just questions to be pondered. And I don't feel like there's a overstepping or over managing. So I really appreciate that. Having the opportunity to review and I'm just thinking aloud right now, and then you can take from that what makes sense. The updated WASDA guidance was really helpful too. I've been going through that and keep going back to that. So I think that kind of calibrating on that if we need to, if and when, I think is a good opportunity for us to continue to deepen that partnership. And the two officially, I mean, it's not even 2 weeks, but in the last 4 weeks, I think those are the things that have been really highlights and very helpful. Is that helpful?
Definitely. And then in terms of like how we word this goal, the themes I'm hearing are like feedback, two-way feedback, curiosity from the board, and then coaching and resources for you as a superintendent.
So I updated that one to supporting the new superintendent while staying in our lane with two-way feedback, curiosity from the board, and supporting coaching and resources as needed. Does that fit what we just discussed? Excellent. Do we feel the need to craft these carefully at the moment, or just in the idea of your first comment, just keep them straightforward and brief and not worry about the exact wording, but the ideas behind it? Okay.
I would be willing to work on wording to make them as smart or smarty as possible in a group of no more than one other board member, so it doesn't become a public meeting.
Then I will share this document this notes document with you. And if no other board member is interested in it, I'm happy to discuss it with you if you need that discussion.
And then also, 2 years ago when we had goals, we had 6, and the sentiment seemed to be that was too many. Now we have 5, so we went down by 1. Are we feeling good about that, or should we whittle them further?
I think while one of them is brevity of communication, I think that that's something we can keep top of mind, but isn't something we have to like put effort out to check off. So I think that 4.5. Four in a value, as Director Downs just said, since it wasn't on
Sounds
the
like a
mic.
fast food restaurant offer.
Okay, any other comments or questions on these? Thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned. Good night.